The last time I introduced myself as her husband, it was to a stranger with a calm voice who told me my wife had just been cut out of a crumpled sedan on the 50, and did I have a minute to answer some questions. I remember the pause after he said your wife, like he left a hook in the word and waited to feel if I'd flinch. I did. Not because of the accident, at least not first, but because we were married. We wore the word sometimes like comfortable shoes when it helped us get through forms or hotel check-ins, but I've never seen it typed on a hospital intake screen with my number sitting under it like proof. I told the doctor yes, I was her husband and I could be there in 20. My heart did that thing where it sprinted while my mind stood still squinting at life I didn't recognize. On the drive I kept trying to picture the accident, the color of the car, the angle of metal, the way air smells when the radiator cracks and it's all hot sweet steam. But what I kept seeing was that single word wife pinned like a butterfly on a stainless steel tray. At the ER desk the nurse asked me to spell her last name and then watched my face too long. Maybe I'm paranoid, but I swear she could see my hesitation when I wrote spouse on a line bold enough to feel like lying. I told myself it was a harmless shortcut, the same way we told the landlord we were like married to get the lease without our parents as co-signers, the same way we snapped a selfie and used hubby/wifey as a joke in the caption because we were 20-something and thought irony could protect us from sincerity. They let me back to a room where the lights buzzed and smelled like detergent. She was awake, hair stuck to her face, pupils like white coins. Her skin had that thin, paper look that makes you feel like a clumsy person in a shop full of fragile things. She wasn't broken. A concussion, some stitches, a bruise across her chest where the seatbelt grabbed her like a panicked parent. She kept saying she was sorry, like the crash was an inconvenience she'd caused me, like I had somewhere better to be. I sat on the edge of the bed and told her to stop apologizing. I meant it. But even there in that room, I was two people, the man holding her hand and the man counting the times we'd put a husband on paper and wondering how many tiny lies he can stack before they look like a house. They offered her an overnight for observation. She refused. That's her thing, refusing to be watched. We stopped at a pharmacy on the way home. She insisted she could walk to the door alone and came back with what, a fistful of receipts like confetti and the smell of peppermint gum. The car ride was quiet and heavy. She leaned her head against the window and I studied the reflection of her face in the glass, that ghost version so still. I wanted to ask what she was thinking, but I was afraid of the answer. I told myself I'd saved the talking for the morning when the world wasn't held together by fluorescent lights and adrenaline. In the morning, an envelope waited in our mailbox like it had been growing there overnight. It was government white, the kind that makes you check your breath for guilt when you open it. Department of Revenue up in the corner, her name in sharp black under. There are letters you open like Christmas and letters you open like a bomb. This was the latter. I slit it with my thumbnail and felt my stomach turn because I recognized the weight of the paper and the officious language before I even read the number. A past due notice. A large one. Not a parking ticket, not a leftover utility. This was 5 figures with a comma too far to the left. The line item said estimated self-employment tax underpayment. I read it twice, the way you check a price tag when you hope you misread it. Then I read it a third time because I knew I hadn't. I felt a heat rise in my neck. I looked up at our apartment like it might have changed shape while I stood in the hallway. In our kitchen she was stirring oatmeal like a woman in a commercial about good health. I stood there holding the envelope and thought, self-employment. I knew her job. I knew her schedule. I knew the name of her boss and the way she complained about the coffee machine in the break room. Self-employment meant a life I hadn't been introduced to. I put the envelope on the table. Don't picture a dramatic confrontation, there wasn't one. She stood with the spoon in her hand, looked at the letter, looked at me, and the way she swallowed, I knew this wasn't new to her. I knew I was late to my own life. If this were a clean story, I'd tell you anger came first. It's not clean. First came competence. That's one of my worst traits, how excited I get to fix things that are broken, like I can avoid feeling by managing. I opened my laptop. I googled the department's phone number. I clicked into portals and drafted out payment plans like the way some people calm themselves by color-coding a closet. I looked at her while I was filling in fields and said, casually, "Hey, what is this?" My voice sounded like I was asking where we left the scissors. She stood very still, and I heard the spoon clink against the pot in a way that felt like a lie setting down its luggage. "I need to tell you something," she said. Not in a melodramatic way, but like a person starting a meeting on time. Before you judge her, you should know she had a bruise across her collarbone that looked like a purple fingerprint of fate, and you should know I already felt protective of her, and you should know I loved her. You can hold all those things in your hand and still be angry. Humans are messy like that. She told me about a shop. Not a physical shop, not a cute storefront I could have taken a picture in front of, but a business that lived on a laptop and inside a storage unit across town. It had a name I'd never heard, an LLC I'd never Google noticed, a website with a minimalist template and photos that looked like they belonged in the store we used to walk past and say one day. She told me she started it small, evenings and weekends, when I was at the gym or working late. She told me it had started to work. She told me the tax letter wasn't a mistake, it was the bill success ends when it realizes you haven't been cutting it a check. When someone you love tells you they've been living a second life, yes, a business counts, you feel two things at once, that the ground is opening and that at least it isn't opening under both of you. I wanted to be furious. I wanted to say all the righteous lines about trust and transparency and don't I deserve to know. But there was also this other part of me that admired the hell out of her. Not just the outcome, anyone can admire a graph that slopes up, but the grit it takes to try. The night she must have taped boxes, the emails she answered at midnight, the inventory she counted while pretending to watch shows with me on the couch. I pictured her in the storage unit with a space heater sucking the breath out of the room, packing orders while her breath fogged in the cold, and I felt something like pride push through my anger like a weed through concrete. She said she did it to build a safety net. She didn't use those words like a weapon. She said she wanted a just in case in a voice that made me feel like a threat I never intended to be. If you're wondering what kind of man I am that the woman who loved me needed to quietly stitch a parachute, I've asked myself that too. When we were 22, I was the guy who had plans like posters, big glossy ideas we'd tape to the walls, a house by 30, a ring by 25, a trip, a business. When we were 25, my plans started to look like bills. I had chased salaries like there were staircases but never quite climbed to the landing. I had moments of brilliance and long stretches of okay. I am in many ways painfully average. She is not. That imbalance was the itch under our skin, the thing we didn't talk about because it felt rude to grief. She could see I wasn't an anchor yet, not a person you could tie your life to and relax. She made her own rope. I wish I could tell you I applauded, and then we calmly organized our finances like adults in a budgeting app. If you've ever been blindsided, you know how you vacillate between kindness and the kind of sharp that cuts the person you love just to make them bleed like you. We started to live in those oscillations. I'd help her reconcile spreadsheets in the afternoon and then lie awake at night making lists of every time she'd been home late and what boxes those minutes could have come in. I started noticing the way her phone stayed face down, which I'd never cared about before. It becomes dangerous when her brain learns to solve pain by building stories where you're the victim and the other person is a suspect. I'd catch myself, not my best self, enjoying the righteousness of anger. If I'm the wronged one, I don't have to look at my own part in a thing. That's the addictiveness of betrayal, how it lets you feel morally tall. The tax bill forced us into the open. I told her we had to deal with it now before penalties made it sprout new heads. I sat at our dining table with a notebook and wrote out numbers with a pen that dented the page. She showed me the books, passwords to accounts with balances that felt like a secret garden I'd been walking past while complaining about our dead grass. I found the spreadsheet she kept with product margins and notes like people like the blue version more in winter, and I felt weirdly moved by the intimacy of it. The world inside her mind was an economy with its own weather. She'd built forecasts. She'd planned for seasons that never came. I could see how close she'd come to telling me 100 times and didn't. She was afraid, yes. But it wasn't just that. It was ownership. You can say you share everything with your partner, but there's a holiness in making something that's yours that is hard to give away even to someone who loves you. She'd been told by life more than once that the people you love can leave. She wanted to know that if love slipped, the floor wouldn't. Here's a thing I did that I'm not proud of. I used the word we like a rope to pull her creation into my boat. I said we should file this and we need to call a CPA and we should track cost of goods sold differently, like pluralizing the problem made it belong to me. I told myself I was helping, I was. But there was a part of me that wanted to be inside it because being outside of it made me feel like a stranger in my own house. It wasn't so different from the way I'd been holding on to her husband. I wanted the title that let me walk through doors. We hired a CPA. He wore shirts that made him look like a high school teacher and spoke in paragraphs. He explained quarterly estimates and safe harbor rules and the way the IRS thinks like a machine that hates surprises. He didn't know he was narrating the philosophy of our relationship. He laid out a payment plan that wouldn't sink us if we stuck to it. I watched her face while he talked and could see her move from the panic of exposure to the relief of a plan. I like plans. Plans are made of future, and I am greedy for future when the present is messy. Here's where the story darkens. Success doesn't stay a secret gracefully. Once the business started paying the taxman, once the shipping got smoother, once suppliers started emailing her first, it got louder. She changed a little. Not in a villain way. In the way you stand up taller when something proves you were right to trust yourself. She bought a coat that fit like it knew a tail. She started talking about brand voice and lead times. She used I when she talked about the business in a way that made me flinch because I wanted a we. Every time she said a might, I heard not yours. That was my insecurity, not her insult, but insecurity is still heavy when it lands. We tried to adjust. On good days we were a team. On bad ones I was a critic with a ring light. We'd be sitting at dinner and she'd say, I may need to go to Delhi for a supply meeting, and I'd smile and say, of course, and inside I'd be building nonsense theories about why she hadn't told me sooner. If you've led someone while also suspecting them, you know the whiplash. One minute I'm making her a coffee, the next I'm peeking at her browser history like a security guard in my own house. One night, maybe a month after the accident, she came home late, cheeks bright with the cold, and she looked happy. That was the worst part. Her happiness made my suspicion feel like a mean dog. She told me a big retailer had reached out and her shop was being considered as a small batch partner for the holidays. It was the kind of news you cheer for. I did cheer. But it's also the kind of news that forces a mirror up. She had built something that other people wanted. I had built a life that required the word we to feel whole. We started couples therapy. If that sounds like a Hail Mary, it was. The therapist had a warm office and a half-dead plant and a diploma that felt like a third person in the room. In the second session, she asked us to talk about safety. Not the alarm system kind. The kind that lives in your chest. We each wrote down what made us feel safe, and I swear to you, we both wrote control, which is hilarious and tragic if you think about it. If safety means control and you love someone who also needs control, that's not a relationship, that's a hostage negotiation with a candle in the middle. During all this, the tax letters kept arriving. Not threats, just statements, the way an institution says, we're still here. They were always in her name, and every time the envelope hit our mail slot, it sounded like a tiny gavel. It reminded me the business was legally hers. We could say ours all day, but the IRS only sends one envelope. I finally asked her the question the envelope had been asking me, why didn't you tell me? Not in a courtroom way. In the kitchen at 10 p.m. with sock feet and a sink full of evidence we were trying. She didn't look away. She didn't use the accident or the stress on my ego as a smokescreen. She said she was building a safety net in case I left. She didn't say it cruelly or with a smug, you finally see tone. She said it like someone who had sat in the quiet at 3 a.m. more nights than I realized, filing fear into folders and labeling them with dates. She said love had always felt conditional to her, and she wasn't going to let her whole life rest on the condition that I chose her forever. She said I had made big promises with small follow-through more times than she felt okay counting. She said she didn't want to become the kind of partner who keeps a ledger, so she kept a savings account instead. I wish I could say I heard that and was humble. What I did was imagine every moment she'd worked on it and not told me as little betrayals, 1,000 paper cuts. In my worst minutes, I performed hurt like a sport. Maybe you've done that, built hurt like a case, gathered exhibits, rehearsed closing arguments in the shower. It feels powerful right up until it eats your life. We had a week where we lived in separate corners of the apartment like roommates who didn't love each other yet had to share the same dog. In the silence, I kept looking at her and feeling two men inside me fight. One wanted to hold her harder because I might lose her. The other wanted to let her go first so I could say I didn't get left. Then came the call from the retailer. They were in. She needed to ramp inventory in a way that would have been radioactive to our savings if not for the business cash flow. She stayed up 3 nights in a row plotting production schedules and calculating risk. I made her food and left it at the door like a hotel tray. I watched her from the hallway like a private ghost. Do you know that feeling? Loving someone's excellence while resenting the way it proves you're not part of it. I'm not a monster. I'm a person. Those two things can sit at the same table. We got through the rollout. Orders came. Boxes multiplied. The storage units started to look like a Tetris level at the end. We high-fived and laughed and kissed, and I convinced myself this was the montage before the credits. But I was building a quiet grudge plank by plank. The accident had knocked something loose in me I hadn't noticed before, the knowledge that I might get a husband title by convenience but not by truth. The business made the difference between us visible in a way that was hard to sit next to. She was the one you'd bet on. I was the one you'd hope for. Once you realize that, you either grow or you go. I tried to grow. I looked for new roles at work. I took courses at night. I told myself if I became the kind of person who didn't scare her into safety nets, we'd find our way back to the softness we had when our biggest secret was eating dessert first. I make it sound noble, it was also desperate. I changed everything but the part of me that needed control. That part leaked out in questions that sounded helpful but weren't. Did you remember to update the supplier terms? Means do you still need me? Should we maybe hire a bookkeeper? Means where do I fit? The day we decided to separate wasn't dramatic. No slammed doors. No packed bag in a movie's evening light. We sat with the therapist and admitted that the relationship had become a negotiation of boundaries instead of our home. We both cried, the ugly kind, and then we walked outside and the sky hallowed enough to be beautiful. Breakups are like that. You want thunder but you get a cartoon sky. We agreed on timelines and furniture and the dog's custody like people who know the shortest path through pain is a straight line. We said we'd be kind because there was enough unkindness in the world already. The last thing to decide was the business. It was hers, obviously. Legally, morally, historically. It had been born in the dark while I slept. It had grown under fluorescent lights with her breath in the cold. I expected she would protect it like a child, and maybe, privately, I was relieved because if she took it there would be no doubt about the story she left, and she took the thing that made her leave. But she didn't do that. She did something I still don't fully understand. She said she wanted me to have. Before you put me on your shoulders and parade me around the internet as a victim who got his compensation, stop. Don't forget the tax letters started this. Don't forget I wore her husband like a keycard. Don't forget how eager I was to call her my wife when it got me back to her bed after an accident. I'm not clean here. But also don't dismiss the complexity of what she did. She said leaving me the business felt right. That it was a way to balance the scale she didn't want to live on anymore. She said she had built the safety net for herself, and it had worked. She had learned she could land without me. Keeping the business would make the net into a wall. Leaving it with me made it something else. She used the phrase compensation, and I flinched because it made our love feel like a settlement. She didn't say it to be cruel. She said it because she has the kind of honesty that doesn't dress up to be liked. I resisted. I told her I couldn't take it. That it would feel like stealing a painting I didn't paint. She shrugged the way she does when a decision is already in her bones. She said if I didn't want to run it, I could sell it, and either way the value would help with the damage our breakup would do to both our lives. She said she wanted to leave me with something that wasn't just the echo of us. She said it would make it easy to walk away knowing I wasn't walking into wind. She said quietly this would make up for the months I spent being confused in my own house. She didn't cry when she said it, I did. I signed papers at a long, too bright table in a room that smelled like new carpet. The lawyer had the pleasant efficiency of a person who moves other people's feelings around like paper. I watched my name slide into places it hadn't been and felt the weight of it. Ownership is heavier than I expected. It felt less like treasure and more like a responsibility I have to grow shoulders for. When we walked out into the sun, she kissed my cheek like you kiss a cousin at a reunion, and I felt a level in me click. Not closure, don't trust anyone who says that word with a straight face, but a setting I felt level enough to walk on. Now I run the business. There's a version of this story where you clap because look, the betrayed man turned it around and found himself and the American dream patted him on the head. That's not this. Running a business is like living in a house your ex designed. The light hits in ways that make you remember where her plants used to sit. The passwords are yours now, but the ghosts still log in. Suppliers still ask how she's doing. Customers still send emails that begin with I've loved your eye for color, and I answer them and feel like I'm wearing her jacket. The margins don't change because the names do. The IRS still wants its envelopes opened. I've improved some things. I've messed up others. On some days I'm proud. On others, I feel like a placeholder in the story I didn't write. You want to know if I resent her for giving me the business? I don't. Not anymore. I understand now that it was the bravest, strangest kindness she knew how to give. She was telling me I mattered, and maybe not in the way I wanted as the man she built a life with, but in a way that didn't disappear when the we did. She was also telling herself something. That she didn't need the net anymore. That she could walk on the wire without it, or build a different one, or decide she was tired and get off the damn wire altogether. There's dignity in admitting the tool you made to save you has done its job and you can set it down. I also understand this. I was angry she kept the secret because I wanted to be the place she brought her secrets. That's beautiful in a poem and dangerous in a real apartment. People think love is full access. It isn't. Love is a lockbox with the combination we share and then change and then share again, if we're lucky. Love is learning to live with the part of the person that is a country you can visit but never own. I wanted to hold her so close she forgot the air. She wanted to breathe. Those two projects can coexist for a while, fueled by sex and youth and the belief that you're the exception. Then life sends an envelope. I drive the same highway she crashed on and think about how quickly a life becomes paperwork. You sign forms, you initial, you click I agree, and suddenly you're one thing and not another. I wasn't her husband, but I said I was, and it got me to her bed when she needed a hand to hold. She wasn't just my girlfriend, but she didn't want to be my wife, not then, not like that. Neither of us was wrong. Both of us were trying to stay alive in a world that likes boxes because boxes make shipping easier. Do I miss her? Yes. In the stupid ways, when I find the loose screw in the junk drawer she used as a tiny museum, when I pass the cafe where she liked the linen bars, when I hear a song that used to make her do the shoulder dance while she brushed her teeth. I also miss her in the big ways, the way her brain sped up when she had a problem to solve, the way she dropped her phone when the dog did something dumb because she didn't want to miss a real moment for a screen. I miss the us that existed before the text letters stacked up on a counter like a chorus. If you're waiting for a villain, you can make either of us into one and be right. She hid a life. I hid behind a title. She built a safety net in secret. I tried to turn her I into a we because plural made me feel bigger. She said she was afraid I'd leave. I never left until we both did. We're not a parable. We're two people who loved each other the way we knew how until the way we knew how stopped working. Here's the part people fight about in the comments. Did she do the right thing leaving me the business? Some say it's guilt money, hush money, the morality equivalent of returning a borrowed sweater. Others say it's the rare, exact, surgical generosity that keeps a good ending from bleeding out. I used to argue out loud with those imaginary people while doing inventory, but now I think both are a little true. The business is a gift with teeth. It feeds me and bites me. It keeps me connected to a woman who is not mine anymore. It makes me answer emails written in her voice and try to reply in something like my own. It makes me measure my days in orders and wonder if I'm living in a tribute band of my own life. The last time I saw her was at a coffee shop that knows how to make the milk look like a leaf. She looked like a future I didn't get to have, which is to say beautiful in a way that felt factual. We talked the way exes do when the wound has a good scab, careful, kind, a little boring. She told me she was moving, that she found a place with a window that faces east, which I know she loves because mornings make her feel like she's cheating time. She asked about the business, and I told her it was steady and that I was learning, and she smiled like she genuinely hoped I would. That smile did something in me I can't name. It felt like permission I hadn't earned but would accept anyway. If you were hoping I'll wrap this in a moral bow, I can't. Here's what I have instead. Sometimes the person you love builds a safety net because the world taught them gravity early. Sometimes the net catches them and you, and sometimes it catches them and not you, and sometimes they fold it and hand it to you like an apology that's also a dare. Sometimes the word husband is a shortcut you take to be good, and sometimes it's a word you need to wait to say until you've built the house it describes. Sometimes the government is just a plot device that shows you where your secrets are. I'm 30 now, which isn't old but is older than you are when you think love is supposed to feel like a movie trailer. I own a business started by a woman who loved me and didn't trust me to be forever. I open the mail like a man who has learned letters can change your life. I'm decent at spreadsheets and worse at goodbyes. I still want to be a husband one day, but I want it to be a word that doesn't need a car accident to make it real. I want to be the kind of man no one who loves me has to build a safety net to survive. If that sounds like growth, maybe it is. Or maybe it's branding. Modern people sell our pain back to ourselves as lessons because it's the only way we know to make it pay rent. I don't know. What I do know is this: I sign the tax checks on time now. I take boxes with a weird respect like I'm closing something fragile inside. I keep the key to the storage unit on the ring by itself. When I lock it at night, I sometimes whisper thank you into the dust for what she built, what she gave, what she kept. And if you're asking whether I earned any of it, that's the wrong verb. Love doesn't do merit. It does math differently. It counts bruise and breath and the way you show up. It counts the days you choose a we when your ego wants I. It counts the way you leave when staying would turn your home into a courtroom. We divorced. The judge said some words that turned us from one thing into two, and I went home to a unit full of boxes that weren't mine, but were, and I felt a ache I couldn't categorize. She left the business to me as compensation. It's the neatest word for the messiest gift I've ever been handed. On good days it feels like a bridge. On bad ones a bill. On most days it feels like this, a reminder that the opposite of betrayal isn't loyalty, it's transparency, and the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. I can live with the first pair. I am learning to avoid the second. And if you think she was wrong to build the safety net, or I was wrong to take it, or both of us were wrong to call each other husband and wife whenever it made the world easier to bear, maybe you're right. Or maybe you're just lucky you haven't had to make a choice between the truth that keeps you safe and the story that gets you through the door. Either way, the mail comes on time. Either way, the storage unit closes with the same heavy click. Either way, love keeps the books even when you don't.